I mean, these are questions that we have to ask ourselves. 99.99% of us are depending on Uncle Sam to be there for us. I'm not taking that one to the bank. I'm going to tell you right now, we have to self-govern. Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. David Penn, your host. Glad you're with us. Episode number 175. It's Up to Me, coming to you on this very chilly night in the belly of the beast. Communism in the upper Midwest, Minneapolis, Minnesota, coming to you from the studios of Free People Radio this Tuesday night, January 21st, the start of a new era. And one might say, I could be better prepared. For this opening segment, I wrote in my notes over the weekend, I work on the scripts over the weekend, I wrote scenes from Trump inauguration and comments. So much has happened. I didn't prepare anything, but I had these thoughts along the lines of, um, blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for letting me see this day. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the imprisoned, the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive us, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed, for you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. Well, for those of you who have heard this prayer before, sounds a little different now, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound a little different? If you go back and play it again and you listen to it and you go, wait a second, wait a second. Some of this stuff is coming true. Like, isn't that weird? Like, thank you for making me free. Hey, you know what? Had this event gone down a different way and we were inaugurating a President Kamala Harris yesterday, today, I think about 20% of the podcasters would have disappeared. They'd have run away because they wouldn't have had the courage to continue because this would have been very dicey, right? Their number one program, had the Democrat won, was to curtail free speech. That was their number one initiative. It's written down. I'm not making it up. You can go back and find it for yourself. We played clips on this podcast of John Kerry, Hillary Clinton. You can't get any more to the top of the funnel than those two skullduggerous characters appealing for an electoral victory so that they would have the juice to cut off the information flow to the people, which is wrecking their program, isn't it? They're getting wrecked because we're waking up. Yes, I am waking up. Thank you, God, for directing my path. Hey, you know what? There's something to these prayers. And a praying people, a people that pray. Uh, well, that's a seldom thing. We haven't seen much of that, these last 65 years. but we're gonna show some of that going on, um, during the course of this podcast. But it occurred to me that President Trump, in his inaugural address to the nation, did reference his miraculous survival, and he did say that he believed that God had, um, chosen him to do something. I got the impression he was saying, "We should probably run the clip," that he was spared by the Lord to do the Lord's work. That's how I took it. We're gonna come up with that on the next podcast, you know, because this bears some real, investigation. I don't know that, I was comfortable with that. Not that the Lord spared him for doing the Lord's work, I'm very comfortable with that, but, saying that you were spared, publicly as a public figure, that's a bold statement. It's a very bold statement. You see, one would have to live up to that kinda comment, so it's a setup in a number of different directions. But he said it, and, I guess at this point, any comment about God in the public sphere after these last 75 years of communism sounds great. You're gonna say, "75 years of communism? I think I live in America." We've been living in the New World Order since 1946. We've been getting boiled like frogs in the pot, and what we have here is a momentary interruption in our boiling, and it will continue. We will continue to be enslaved unless we do what? Unless we self-govern. It is right now, for example, here in the belly of the beast, at this moment, a balmy minus 18 degrees. Minus 18 degrees. Now, we said this in the previous podcast about LA burning. What if the power and the gas flows were interrupted to your home if you live in Minnesota today? What would you do? Do you have wood chopped in the backyard? Do you have a hearth? Do you have cold weather survival gear? Do you have the kind of foods that you would need to keep your calories coming in this kind of cold? I mean, these are questions that we have to ask ourselves because right now, 99.99% of us are depending on Uncle Sam to be there for us. And unless we are there ourselves, we're making an assumption that I'm not taking that one to the bank. I'm gonna tell you right now, we have to self-govern. We have to win in 2026. We have to win in 2028, and I don't mean the Republican Party. I mean the people. Trump even said in his, signing when he was signing executive orders in the Oval Office, he said, "This is not very Republican. It's a different Republican Party." Yes, we're in a period of political realignment. Labels don't mean very much if we continue to realign. And the realignment has to head towards policies about the health and well-being of the American people, and we have to go from being critics to proposing solutions, and we're gonna be arguing about this. How do we solve these problems? I am not a Trump sycophant, and I don't want you to be a Trump sycophant. He's a politician, he's a human being, he's got feet of clay, and all he was for me is better than the alternative. It is we, the people, that are gonna make the difference in the long term. If we just go 4 years and we don't do our work, if we don't do our homework, who is gonna be like President Trump, who's a once in a 100-year candidate? Who's gonna be like President Trump? Who do we have that's going to be like President Trump? You gotta ask yourself that question because he's an anomaly, and he won through force of will, through his own charisma, through his own path. God directed his path, but God is directing our paths if we pray that way. Now, let me give you a action item. Here's an action item. Hope Dan Schultz is listening. Dan Schultz, the progenitor of the precinct strategy. I spend time with Dan because I think his strategy and tactics are correct. Dan Schultz wants American citizens to self-govern by entering the parties. Now, Dan does not talk about the Democrat Party, but I will. And Dan, if you're listening, I'm going to tell you, I would be very effective in the Democrat Party also, because it's about policy, not labels. It's about policy, not labels. Now, because they're a bunch of anti-God folks over there, they got a long way to go. But there's a lot of people that could go into that party, just like people are going in the Republican Party, and change the nature of that party's politics so that it's more reflective of 1776 instead of 1946. Everything can change. And I'll tell you what my fear is, and I do share my fears here on the podcast. My fear is we've got a very narrow window of opportunity to change this country. The Uni Party has always existed since parties started, and it will just shift because the best way to control the opposition is to lead it. And this is a big problem, right? Because now we're going to have all these people in every state party, in the federal government. They're all going to be waving their Donald Trump flags and wearing their MAGA hats. And we don't have to think back very long to remember when they were Mike Pence supporters. Like, for example, Alex Plekish, who's the new chair of the Minnesota GOP, was a Mike Pence supporter. How do I know it? I served on a board with him. I knew his politics. He approached me and asked me to work against Donald Trump. But right now, he's our chair and he's all in on Donald Trump. And this is the tricky part. Alex might have changed. I am not a judge. I just have a memory. And when he goes on television, he was on CCO, and I didn't see the bit myself, but someone reported to me that Alex was talking about we need to have higher quality candidates, as if Royce White was not a high quality candidate. You see, because these people conflate, when it suits them, someone's personal life with their political opinions in an effort to discredit them. This is my great fear. My great fear is that we have a window of opportunity and we'll squander it because we think we won and we didn't win. It's a battle between good and evil. And this battle has existed time immemorial and will continue to go on until such a time as it doesn't. And that time is not today. So I'm very happy uh, at one level. At one level, I'm very happy that we have this inauguration of President Trump. On another level, um, I'm just concerned. I guess because I'm always concerned. I'm concerned because for me, it's about we the people. It's about us. It's not about. I was just getting ready for the show, and I'm thinking to myself. I was thinking about a guy named Paul Gazelka, who's a local politician here in Minnesota. And I remember when I first interacted with him, I was careful about what I said because he was an elected representative. Like, oh, he's powerful. This guy is an insurance agent from Cow Corner, Minnesota. Okay? He's not powerful. He acts powerful. When we understand that we, the people, are the power and these people usurp it and then use it and squander our energy like drunken sailors, they're vampires upon us, spending our energy as if they own it. When we understand that and we flip it around and put them in the saddle to work for us, hey, the opportunists will no longer be involved in the game. We'll only have dedicated public servants because we, the people, have shown up. And going back to Dan Schultz, I didn't forget, Dan, we're taking action. Dan is leading action. Now, I say we have to be involved. Okay, there is a Spaces. Everybody knows what X is. I've urged you to follow at Prof. Penn Podcast on X. I'm going to urge you to join. There's thousands of people that are going to watch this episode. So please, thousands of you show up every Friday night on X on a Spaces that Dan is setting up with an associate of his named Jonathan Broadbent. It'll be a precinct strategy Spaces. It is dedicated to one thing and one thing only, helping all of us get involved in our local political party. It's great. The way Dan does this is great. And it's familiar to me because, we have some of the same background. Here's the way it goes. We stay open for business in that space until everybody is done. And Dan is the last guy off the floor. That's the way you do it. It's very cool. Last Friday night, we had a great conversation. People from all over the country. We need you to join. We need you to come in. And if you're in Minnesota, come in for sure, because this is going to be the center of how we organize our political activities going into the 2026 caucus night, where we intend to take over with the citizens and start a new Republican Party here in Minnesota. Tanner, there is a map picture. It's in blue. Under global debt reaches $315 trillion, which is 333% of global GDP, and no sovereign debt has ever been repaid when it exceeds 100% of GDP. So if you think we got trouble in River City, you're right, we do. Can you just play this map? It's a time-lapse map. This is Minnesota. Lots of blue in 2012. Oh, look at it's going red. 2020 getting real red. And here is 24. Play it one more time, please. Look at that. Very light. Look at that. It's going blue, blue, blue. And here it comes back. It's coming back. These are the election results from these elections. And the Minnesota Republican Party is going to tell me that's because of their great efforts. And it has nothing to do with them. They've tried to stand in the way of this. They've actually obstructed this movement. This is the movement of American citizens getting access to media, watching Alex Jones, watching Steve Bannon, watching Tucker Carlson, watching RAV, watching Royce White, watching podcasts. It's changing how people think. The Republican Party of Minnesota is mired in yesteryear. The average age of the party is 462-year-old. They got nothing to do with we the people. They're running their own game. It's a private club. And the way to change that is when we the people join their club. We just need to join the club. President Biden, also 462 years old, a crypt keeper, made some very interesting comments on his way out. Tanner, could you please play number 2?
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous concentration, and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before, more than a century ago. But the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen.
All right, now let's play number 1, because, an oligarchy for me, but not for thee, is what President Biden is actually sharing with us. Let's play number 1.
You've indicated there's a transaction where a Soros-backed group would take ownership of over 200 radio stations across 40 different markets after the FCC originally indicating that transaction could be reviewed and approved at the bureau level without a commission vote. It's now become clear that that is a decision before the full commission, and it's one that I would assume now or in the near future the commission would approve. I think what's interesting about it is that the FC here is not following its normal process for reviewing a transaction. We have established over a number of years one way in which you can get approval from the FCC when you have in excess of 25% foreign ownership, which this transaction does. And it seems to me that the FCC is poised to create, for the first time, an entirely new shortcut.
Yeah, thank you. As you pointed out here and previously, these proceedings for transfer of ownership have been expedited. What exactly makes this case so deserving of an expedited proceeding so far, from what you could tell?
There is nothing about this transaction that is out of the ordinary. It's the type of thing that we see all the time, and the FCC has a process for this. The full commission itself has never signed off on a shortcut like this. What we usually do is we require people to file a petition with us. We bring in national security agencies. They can review the foreign ownership. It's probably no big deal here, but we review that foreign ownership, and then we vote. Here, they're trying to do something that's never been done before at the commission level.
Well, isn't that special? So it's oligarchy for me and not for thee. President Biden, his speech somewhat reminiscent to me of General Eisenhower's farewell address in 1961 before the Kennedy era kicked off, where he warned, and we've played it on the podcast, where he warned us about a permanent technocratic and bureaucratic class of managers, of administrators who are aligned with the security state and with the military-industrial complex. He warned us, even though he was so central in putting together that group of people. Those were his guys. So in a very similar way, from my perspective, President Biden is warning us about oligarchs, which brought the Democrat Party to power, kept the Democrat Party in power. It is the party of the wealthy. That is why they lost, is because they have lost their connection with working class Americans. Well, hey, politics is all about branding. But let us not for 1 second forget, these people have power only because you and I are not involved in politics. If we were involved in politics, it wouldn't matter how much money they had. There's way more of us than there is of them. They would have to respond to us instead of vice versa. So they're just operating in the void that you create, that I create, because we don't want to spend 3 hours a month at meetings and then devote ourselves to governing this country. It's us. They work for us. They are derived. Their powers are derivative from what we grant them. The only reason it is the way it is because we are, for lack of a better term, slothful. Well, there's good news. There's good news. On the eve of President Trump's inauguration, what a surprise. Peace broke out in the Gaza Strip. What a shocker. I was stunned. My goodness. Here comes President Trump, and everybody decided it was time to develop the waterfront of Gaza, which President Trump even alluded to this past Monday evening when he was signing the executive orders. He said it's a beautiful piece of property. The weather is great there. I mean, he's ready to put condos up all along the Gaza Strip. He just says, well, we got some problems there first. I think that it's just great that there's peace. It's not peace. It's a ceasefire, which is kind of like peace, but a little different. What's the difference? Peace lasts. A ceasefire is just a period during which people rearm themselves. So it's a marker in time. And I just want to play 4 clips to interject some other ideas that are not really on the beaten path where all of us are spending our time. Under the ceasefire part of the script, could you please play Roman numeral number 2?
However, as I understand that what's happened on the 7th on October, this doesn't happen really on the 7th. This happened for 75 years ago. This is only the outbreak what's happened, what comes after oppression of 75 years. Oppression, killing, taking away land, controlling someone, controlling a whole nation. When to have electricity, when not. When to have water, and when not. How many hours a day, how many not. This is crazy. It's unbelievable how people can live under such a big oppression from other people on the head. They say they give them the land of Asa as a piece of land to rule themselves. What kind of ruling self is that?
And let's just go right on to Roman numeral number 3.
I'm willing to say, with some caution, that this is the last phase of Zionism. Historically, such development in ideological movements, whether they are colonials or empires, doesn't matter, in the past. It's usually the final chapter, the ruthless one, the most ambitious one, and then it's too much. And then they fall and collapse. When we say neo-Zionism, we mean, I think, that the old values of Zionism are now being more extreme in a far more aggressive form than they were before, trying to achieve in a short time what the previous generation of Zionists were trying to achieve in a much longer, more incremental, gradual way. So this is an attempt by a new leadership of Zionism to complete the work, if you want, that they started in 1948, namely of taking over officially the whole of historical Palestine and getting rid of as many Palestinians as possible. Scenario in which you have minimal American involvement is a positive scenario. The whole political structure that was built after the First World War is collapsing in front of our eyes, and it includes Israel and Palestine. So these are long regional processes which I think will benefit the Palestinians in the long run and would hopefully create a decolonized country in the end.
That's good. Thank you, Tanner. This is quite controversial. I'm playing this to put some markers down because we have to look at things from various street corners. We would not want to be trapped in one ideological framework. There are many competing, particularly in the Middle East. The historian referenced historical forces that were established after World War I, and who would have established those? That would be the British. The British. Yes, everything we're seeing is the decay and collapse of the British Empire. And I'm going to give you a blast, something you can go look up yourself. Zionism was not the creation of the Jews. It was the creation of British Protestants. Yes, you heard it here first. The Jews picked up the gauntlet that was laid down for them by British politicians and theologians who came together. Yes, the British. Yes. The British. Our great ally, the British, our friends. You know, the folks that we fought a Revolutionary War against and then who came back and burned the White House in 1812? Those guys. They actually came. Did you know they came up with the idea of Zionism, the British? They created it. And I'll tell you why they created it. It was a very interesting It's a very interesting story about how secret societies work. It came out of the theological community of uh, British Protestants. This is a different time now. These Protestants, these were believers. They generated people like General Chinese Charles Gordon, who we talked about, who went to the Sudan and ended slavery there. These people were Christians, and they believed that restoring the Jews to Palestine would hurry the return of the Messiah. Isn't that nice? They actually were intervening. They were interventionists. They were called restorationists. Isn't that great? And then the government, which had contact with these people, because, of course, the government ministers, they were involved with the theologians. After all, everybody went to church on Sunday back in the day. They had a problem because even back in the 1800s, there was these proto legal ideas like if you're going to colonize something, you got to have a reason to do it. I mean, you just can't grab the stuff. It looks bad. And they looked at the Middle East and the declining Ottoman Empire, and they said, wow, the Russians have a claim to Palestine because of the Orthodox Christians that live there. And the French have a claim to Palestine because of the Catholics that live there. But what do we got? We don't got nothing. And then they had a great idea. We're going to put the Jews there, but before we send them there, we're going to convert them to Christianity. They're going to be our guys in the Middle East. And here we are, 150 years later, in a ceasefire. Let's play number 4 underneath that ceasefire section, please. This is a Harvard theologian, Cornel West, recent candidate for president.
Thank God for the ceasefire. There should have been a ceasefire 465 days ago. There should have been a ceasefire 15 months ago. 50,000 precious Palestinians murdered, genocidal attack. 20,000 precious Palestinian children murdered, genocidal attack. And we know that they were Europeans or Israelis, or they were white or Jews, it would be a qualitatively different response. That's where the racism is. We've got to be humanist about this across the board. Every life has the same value. Universities destroyed. Where are the university presidents calling for solidarity with Palestinian universities? Churches destroyed. Where are the pastors and the preachers calling for solidarity with those churches and those mosques that were destroyed? Journalists killed. Where's CNN? Where's MSNBC? Where's the New York Times? Where's the Washington Post journalists being in solidarity with their fellow journalists? The levels of hypocrisy, the depths of barbarity. Thank God the ceasefire is in place. We've got to bring an end to it, just like we've got to bring an end to the occupation. But let us be very clear that Biden and Harris and Blinken and Sullivan and Thomas Greenfield, all the way down, facilitators of genocide of precious Palestinians. Let us keep our armor on and keep trying to tell the truth about what's going on in the Middle East and Africa, in the Caribbean, and in the United States. Thank God the ceasefire is in place now.
And let's end this segment with this next rabbi speaking about the situation.
The Zionists do not represent the Jewish people and certainly not speak in the name of the Holy Torah. The very name Israel was stolen by them. Authentic Jews around the world demand that the entire land and all rights be restored to the Palestinian people. As Jews, we say that our people would be more safe and our religion more respected under Arabs who believe in God and fear Him than under these heretics, Jews only by birth, who make war against Judaism and humanity. We pray for the speedy and peaceful dismantlement of the State of Israel. and for the time when Palestinians and Jews will once again live side by side in peace and harmony. Ultimately, we pray for the time when we will see the fulfillment of our prayers. May all people join together in one group to do the will of the Almighty wholeheartedly, with the revelation of the glory of the Almighty throughout the universe soon in our days. Amen.
Well, that's some different street corners. I have to comment that both Cornel West and the rabbi presented their ideas in front of bookcases, and they both had beards and long hair. I don't know what that means really, but I see some similarities, and these people are focused on peace, the kind of peace that's enduring, not the kind of peace that is a period to rearm, but the kind of peace that we can raise our children in, that we can grow old in, the kind of peace we can rely on so that we can develop prosperity and we can live lives of contemplation and humility, the kind of humility that I seek in my own life and that I'm urging our leaders to rediscover. Well, not easy to do when you travel to the Emerald City and sit down in front of the wise men, as Pete Hegseth did last week. Pete Hegseth has been affirmed as the next Secretary of Defense, replacing the feckless Lloyd Austin. But there was some very interesting things I saw in his confirmation hearings that I wanted to bring to the podcast and share with you. Could you please play number 6, Senator Norm Coleman introducing Pete Hegseth?
Ranking Member Reed, members of the committee, my former colleagues, I'm honored to introduce a son of Minnesota to you, Pete Hegseth. As a senator from Minnesota, I spent many hours with this young man as he walked the halls of Congress advocating on behalf of America's veterans. And he is young in the best sense of the word. He is strong, focused, intelligent, incisive, a great listener, and is almost supernaturally energetic, just what we need in a Secretary of Defense in times of massive change. He is the real deal. F. Scott Fitzgerald was a writer in my city of St. Paul, and said the problem with America is that there are no second acts. He was wrong. Pete was a brave soldier, has been an able communicator, and I believe is about to begin a great second act as our Secretary of Defense. He has struggled and overcome great personal challenges. Please don't give in to the cynical notion that people can't change. We need the ones who can change to lead us, to be beacons of hope, and to remind us that grace can lead us home. 4 years ago, President Biden's nominee, Lloyd Austin, a good and honorable man, received 97 votes on the floor of the Senate. And we went through the debacle of the Afghanistan withdrawal. Putin invaded Ukraine. The Houthis endanger our shipping lanes. We witnessed Israeli miracles against America's enemies in the Middle East, where the United States was more of an impediment than a help. Our recruitment numbers have sunk dramatically, and our southern border has suffered a slow but dangerous invasion. Yes, Pete Hegseth is an out-of-the-box nominee, and I say it's high time to get out of the box. One more thought. The country longs for a government of less division and more respect and dignity. My hope is that this committee hearing provides what they are asking for. Disagree? Yes. Strongly if necessary. But then come together to support the nominee, this nominee, Pete Hegseth, of the one president we have at a time, laying aside partisan politics for the essential mission of national security upon which everything else depends. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Interesting, isn't it? This is a former senator from Minnesota, Norm Coleman. I've had the pleasure of knowing Norm since the 70s. Norm was the former mayor of St. Paul, where I grew up, and where my mother held court as one of the most important and prominent members of the Democrat Party. Norm was no great fan of my mother because my mother was a leftist, and Norm was a Democrat who became a Republican and a very pro-George W. Bush Republican when he was a senator. Little bit of history. He lost to he lost a reelection bid to Senator Franken, Al Franken of Saturday Night Live fame, the comedian, and just for whatever it's worth, don't know the circumstances, but as memory serves me, some ballots showed up late in the night. Late in the night. And Norm Coleman's career ended as a senator, and he was brought out here. Why? Why? Why is he introducing Pete Hegseth? Well, he is a Minnesotan, and they do know each other. But I don't think that was really the issue. The issue is Norm Coleman is the top dog, the director of the RJC. And I want to get this right. I have this issue. It's the Republican Jewish Coalition. The Republican Jewish Coalition, right off their website, is the unique bridge between the Jewish community and Republican decision makers. We're committed to building a strong, effective, and respected Jewish Republican voice in Washington and across the country. And with your help, we can continue this important mission. In other words, Norm Coleman is fronting for a group of people that are pro-Israel. And, he said at the end, the linchpin statement, nothing is more important than national security. Yes, national insecurity seems to be very important to these people. If we want to have security, we're going to have peace. And why Norm Coleman was out there was who's Pete Hegseth? To the 100 senators that are uniformly pro-Israel, uniformly. Why, is there a couple holdouts in there? Maybe. Less than 5. I mean, this is a pro-Israel body, and they didn't know Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth's nomination to be Secretary of Defense was controversial. So he brought Norm Coleman to the committee meeting to get the stamp of approval from the Zionist Project. That's what it was. I saw it. Now you know it. And it doesn't mean Pete Hegseth is a bad guy or a good guy. Let's play the next one.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and all the members of this committee for this opportunity today. I'm grateful for and have learned a great deal from this advise and consent process. Our founders knew what they were doing. Should I be confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee, senators from both parties, to secure our nation. I want to thank the former senator from Minnesota, Norm Coleman, for his mentorship and friendship in this process, and the incoming National Security Advisor, Congressman, and more importantly for our purposes, Colonel Mike Waltz, for his powerful words. I'm grateful to them both. Thank you to my incredible wife, Jennifer, who has changed my life and been with me throughout this entire process. I love you, sweetheart, and I thank God for you. And as Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done.
Isn't that great? I mean, I get such an uplift from hearing any political appointee or elected official refer to the Creator in a public sphere. This has been lacking my entire life, but that doesn't mean it's going to end out great. And you can see why, when someone speaks in such a overtly Christian way, why the RJC'd have to run in and say, yeah, this guy's okay, he's one of us. Because, this can go a lot of different ways. And they don't know which way Pete Hegseth is going to go. They don't know. They're trying to shape the way he's going to go. But before I have my summary statement on this segment where we're going to talk about Romans 11, for those of you who are familiar with those scriptures, he did reference the chairman of the committee, Senator Wicker from Mississippi, and Jack Reed, who's a Democrat, the ranking member, who I'm going to leave for the Democrats to deal with. I want to deal with this Roger Wicker. I want you to see the kind of skullduggerous, crazy people that we have elected and who hold sway and power over us because we don't get involved in politics. Please play this next piece, the 4-minute piece on Wicker on Fox with Neil Cavuto.
Roger Wicker serves on the Armed Services Committee. Senator, we don't know a lot of what transpired in that phone call. We do know that Vladimir Putin still has those 100,000 plus Russian troops on that border. Do you think he'll hold off?
Well, I hope he does. There are two schools of thought on this. One is that it's a ruse, that he really doesn't have any intention of going in, instead using it as a bargaining chip. A lot of other people think that an invasion could take place and could take place within weeks. I'll just say this. Vladimir Putin has surprised the West twice, once in 2008 in Georgia, invading a sovereign nation who was struggling to get out from under the Soviet domination and become a democracy, and in 2014 with Ukraine. He could very well surprise us again, and I hope, although maybe there was no finger wagging in the conversation from the president today, I hope there was a show of resolve that we think this would be a game changer for free Europe, and it's something that the United States and our allies cannot tolerate.
Senator, some of your Republican colleagues think that we should have troops in the region. They don't never, delineate exactly how many, or that they'd be utilized in an outright confrontation with Russia over the Ukraine, but their mere presence would be effective. What do you think of that?
Actually, I think there are over 200 U.S. troops in Ukraine right now under the uniforms of the National Guard, perhaps from California, which is their partner National Guard organization, and perhaps also from Florida. So there are American troops uniformed in Ukraine now.
So they're doing very little in that respect, if you think about it, to hold Putin back. He's obviously got these troops with them there, right?
But they are there, and also there's certainly nothing wrong with us, Neil, getting our troops in place in NATO countries that are treaty allies of ours. So I would be supportive of that.
Senator,
I'll tell you this, Neil, I would not rule out military action. I think we start making a mistake when we take options off the table. So I would hope the president keeps that option on the table, and to the extent that he has agreed to reverse his mistake on Nord Stream 2, if that is in fact what came out of the discussion today, I would applaud that. Hope he does it.
All right, what does military action mean, Senator?
Well, military action could mean that we stand off with our ships in the Black Sea and we rain destruction on Russian military capability. It could mean that. It could mean that we participate, and I would not rule that out. I would not rule out American troops on the ground. We don't rule out first use nuclear action. We don't think it'll happen, but there's certain things in negotiations, if you're going to be tough, that you don't take off the table. And so I think the president should say that everything is on the table. And frankly, to the extent that you had Democrats on the show right before me being quoted as saying we need to be tougher, I support that and I appreciate that. I think they represent the fear that we have, the realization that we have in the Congress, that losing a free democratic Ukraine to Russian invasion would be a game changer for a free Europe.
All right, Senator Wicker, thank you very much. We'll watch it very, very closely.
I'm not done with Senator Wicker. I've played him before. Let's have a little more of Senator Wicker before we finish this segment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues, Europe is at war at this very moment. The lives of tens of thousands of young Europeans hang in the balance at this very moment because of the delusional dictatorship currently in control in Russia, and because of his brazen attack. The free world deserves better than this modern day Adolf Hitler. If Vladimir Putin's recent words and deeds have a haunting familiarity, it is because they are directly out of that Nazi madman's notebook. I mean, no offense to the Russian delegates to this assembly. In effect, they have no alternative but to parrot the Putin line. If they took a position to the contrary, they would, upon returning to Moscow, meet a fate similar to those of Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Boris Nemtsov, Sergei Magnitsky, and Alexei Navalny. I join the virtual unanimous denunciation by my OSC colleagues of this outrage, of this trampling of 7 decades of a rules-based world order. But I must use the few seconds I have today to sound a warning to the defensive military alliance to which most of us belong. If Vladimir Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he will not stop there, just as he did not stop with Transnistria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Crimea, and the Donbass. How can any of us realistically believe he will stop with Ukraine? According to Putin's twisted rationale, every former republic of the USSR is at risk. NATO is at risk. Every member of the peace-loving international community is at risk of being swept up into this conflict. And my colleagues, we are not ready. Our collective military capability is not sufficient to deter the aggression that this Russian dictator is likely to pursue. I will, in the coming hours and days, try to persuade my president, President Biden, and the House and Senate to enact a supplemental defense appropriation bill. I give the same warning to NATO. It is time for my government and the governments of all nations to rethink our priorities and to reorder the military capability of our alliance. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Everything in 1 2-minute and 30-second clip. Senator Wicker references the 70-year rules-based order, also known as the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, also known as the New World Order, the technocracy. He also acknowledges that from his straight corner, Vladimir Putin is just Hitler, which is why we put the whole deal together anyhow, to make sure there was no more genocide and Holocaust. Yet the war continues. And he's working with his president, President Biden. I wonder how this is going to go down, because Wicker is a Republican, when he sees that President Trump wants to bring this to an end. Oh, he's going to pop on a MAGA hat. Doesn't mean he's MAGA, just means he's hiding. Wicker attended the University of Mississippi. He graduated there with a degree in journalism. Oh, journalism, a storyteller. And science, a pillar of the New World Order, in 1973. And then guess what? He became a lawyer in 1975. After graduation, Wicker commissioned into the United States Air Force, not as a warfighter, as Pete Hegseth is continuously talking about and trying to trumpet the importance of the military being focused on who fights the wars. No, this guy became a judge advocate. In other words, he joined the legal team, and he was, from 1976 to 1980, involved in legal affairs for the U.S. Air Force. Started in 1980, he was a member of the Air Force Reserve, from which he retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2003. He's from Mississippi. I have to tell you, I have been in the tire business a long time. There are certain areas of the country I won't do business. Mississippi is one of them. Yes, if I have a customer in Mississippi and they've been with me for a long time, it's okay. Let it rip. New customers in Mississippi don't want it. Mississippi ratified the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. That was the amendment that was ratified on December 6th, 1865, which abolished slavery and involuntary servitude. Let me say this again. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude and was ratified by our country on December 6th, 1865. But Mississippi didn't get around to joining us on this idea until February 7th, 2013. These are the folks that have elected Roger Wicker. So When you don't get involved, let's say in North Carolina or California or Oregon, wherever you're hearing this, there are people in this country that are thinking about things very differently than we are. And it so happens that they've sent the chairman of the Armed Services Committee to Congress from Mississippi, Senator Wicker, and he's in there like a tick on a buffalo's ass. And he's a very powerful and important person. And when we stand up and start to demand peace, I don't know what he's going to do, because this guy is a consummate war hawk. Let us remember, as we go into this new administration, that while the Korean War saved South Korea from communism, it was not a military victory. Let us remember that the Vietnam War was a lengthy, humiliating, and costly defeat. Let us remember that we intervened in Somalia and the Balkans for alleged humanitarian reasons, and there was very little success. That we have fought an endless and indecisive war in Iraq, that we waged and lost a 20-year war in Afghanistan, and we have fought an ill-fated global war on terror, which has reduced our influence in the Middle East and drained our treasury. You know, there was a guy who was the Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan. His name was Caspar Weinberger, and he had what was called the Weinberger Doctrine, something that we might consider getting back to, that our military should only be used if our own vital interests are at stake. Our own vital interests. Kind of sounds America first, doesn't it? Our own vital interests. It is America first. If our armed forces are committed to battle, our sole objective is victory. We're not in the nation-building business. And the size and composition of the force must be sufficient to achieve victory over the enemy. Number 3, we should not commit our armed forces unless we have clearly defined political and military objectives. 4, we should continuously reassess the relationship between our objectives and power and make whatever adjustments are necessary to win. We should not commit the armed forces of the United States to combat unless the war has the support of Congress and the American people. And we should only commit our armed forces to combat as a last resort. Therefore, if we could get back to the Weinberger Doctrine, we the people would have a say when our country went to war. Isn't that interesting? Now, there's another group out there that's represented by the Wicker types that are into this thing in a very kind of religious. I was talking with Tanner before the broadcast, before we got into this today, and he was expressing some of his resistance to some of the things that President Trump was doing on his first night in office. And he, Tanner was saying, we got all these problems. Why are these issues of gender coming up? Why is there an executive order about gender? Well, that's because the people who run this deal are not the people you think run the deal. This deal is run by people who live in secret societies. Yes, you heard me. The secret societies run this world. And there's a bunch of them competing with each other. And some of the folks that brought President Trump to the White House are in secret societies that have a deep and abiding commitment to traditional religion, where there's only 2 genders. And Tanner found this to be remarkable, that this would be up, at the front of his presidency, President Trump's presidency. Well, let me tell you, I played Cornel West, who's a professor of divinity at Harvard, and 2 rabbis, and a historian who was, an academic in Israel, because these are the people that really run the deal. The people that have taken the time to become incorporated into secret societies and have developed power and connections there, and then go through and live their lives, as diplomats or elected officials or as technocrats, bureaucrats, administrators. These are the people that run the deal. And they, excuse me, they have ideas about how the world is supposed to be, about the history of the world, about the future of the world. Romans 11. What's all this with the Jews, right? Romans 11 is written by Paul. It's a letter to the Romans. And Paul writes, did God reject his people? Because he's writing as a Christian, right? The torch has been passed from the Israelites to the Gentiles. He asks, Paul asks in his letter, did God reject his people? And the answer is by no means. I am an Israelite myself, a descendant of Abraham from the tribe of Benjamin. God did not reject his people, whom he foreknew. Don't you know what Scripture says in the passage about Elijah, how he appealed to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars. I am the only one left, and they are trying to kill me? And what was God's answer to Elijah? I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal, a false god. So too at the present, there is a remnant chosen by grace. And if by grace, then it cannot be based on works. If it were, grace would no longer be grace. What then? What the people of Israel sought so earnestly, they did not obtain. The elect among them did, but the others were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that could not see, and ears that could not hear, to this very day. And David says, that's King David, may their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. May their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and their backs be bent forever. And this goes on, Romans 11, and this is the basis. This is the basis of what's going on in the Middle East to this very day. To this very day, this is why you have Christian evangelicals that are Zionists, which, makes no sense to me. These two groups really have nothing to do with each other, except that the evangelicals believe that every word in the New Testament is the revealed word of God, and that their mission is to support the Jewish people. Did they stumble so as to fall beyond recovery? Talking about the Jews. Not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. And it goes on. There's an entire psychological explanation of why Jesus said first for the Jews and then for the Gentiles, and how these groups are related to each other and how they're to interact with each other, culminating with, I do not want you, speaking to the Romans, to be ignorant, speaking to us, the Gentiles. I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. As far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies for your sake. But as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Just as you who are at one time disobedient to God have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience, so they too have now become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercies to you. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. Well, we need to know why it is the way it is. And these same Brits who came up with the idea of Zionism so they could make a claim to the Holy Land for both religious and strategic reasons. Because take a look at the map. It doesn't come any more strategic than Israel. These same Brits have now, right the day before President Trump sat down in the chair, announced that the UK and Ukraine, the British and the Ukrainians, are signing a landmark. You don't know this, Tanner. They signed a 100-year treaty. 100 years. Because the Brits are looking, here comes Trump. Hey, we don't know what he's going to do. This guy could bring about peace. The Brits don't want peace with the Russians. They attacked them in 1805. They tag teamed with the French, who attacked them in 1812. The Brits attacked again in 1853. They attacked again in 1917. They tag teamed with their buddies, the Germans. Yes, they're buddies. Yes. Take a look at where does the king's family come from. They're not British, they're German. You can go on YouTube today and find King Charles speaking German like a native, because he is. Isn't that crazy? Put that on the list of things we need to do. You need to see Prince Charles, King Charles now, the man in charge. Yes, they signed a 100-year partnership. They did, the Ukrainians and the British. The treaty will bolster military collaboration on maritime security through a new framework to strengthen Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and Azov Sea security and deter ongoing Russian aggression. Well, who's really the aggressor? That's the question I've been asking on the Professor Penn podcast, because, depends what street corner you are standing on. Because this war is going on. And, before things settle down, they always heat up. And Ukraine is in the dark today. Their climate is much like Minnesota, where it's 18 below. I'm sure it's not fun to be Ukrainian today. Probably rather cold there. There's no power because the Russians have taken the glove off and they're taking down the Ukrainian electrical infrastructure. That should bring things to an end, right? Because, if you don't surrender, you're going to freeze to death. And we've been covering the Sudan, which you noticed, if you were listening carefully, Cornel West alluded to, because it's a terrible famine and civil war. And there are now retaliatory killings there that we are funding because all the weapons are provided by we the people. And in Syria, there are retaliatory killings. Again, a group that we are funding. They're just, the way they handle things in this part of the world is the old ways. There's winners and losers, and the losers die. They haven't developed liberal sensitivities. Well, let's get into some economy news, because the economy is what it's all about for President Trump. We have had a Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen. She was born on August 13th, 1946, to a family of Polish Jewish ancestry in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And she grew up there. She is an educated woman. She has a PhD in economics from Yale University, the alma mater, by the way, of our new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. They are both Yale graduates. I wonder how different they could be if they're both graduates from Yale. It makes me wonder. They had the same teachers. They read the same books. Maybe they reached different conclusions. Maybe they did not. We will not know it from what they say. We will know it from what they do. Let us play number Roman numeral 10, Yellen and Senator Kennedy on debt.
So $51 trillion of debt up from $33 trillion doesn't bother you?
I think the path that is set out in the president's budget is fiscally sustainable.
Okay. Well, how much debt is too much? Tell me that.
Well, I just gave you the metric that I think is best for assessing fiscal sustainability.
Okay. Let me ask it in simpler terms. I didn't follow you there.
It's
what percentage of our GDP? What debt as a percentage of our GDP is too much?
So it depends on what interest rates are. And real interest rates have been extremely low. This budget and previous budgets have projected that they would move up toward more normal levels over time, but certainly not the levels that we saw several decades ago. And
could you just answer my question, Madam Secretary? What percentage of our debt of our GDP is too much?
Well, this budget has debt held by the public moving up to around 109% of GDP.
And that's not too much, in your opinion?
Historically, it's a high level, but on the other hand, interest rates, real interest rates, have moved down substantially in recent decades. And so higher levels of debt to GDP are sustainable with lower real interest rates. And on balance, as I said, the interest burden of the debt is at a level that is quite reasonable in historic terms.
Madam Secretary, you're a Keynesian.
Well, I don't quite know what you mean by that, but I've certainly studied.
Do you believe?
Yes, there's a PhD in economics, Janet Yellen, the Honorable Secretary of the Treasury. She was formerly the chair of the Federal Reserve. This woman has presided over the greatest increase of debt that we, the people, must shoulder. Our children will shoulder it, and our grandchildren will be shouldering it. And there's no end in sight to the accumulation of this debt, because this is the British business model of debt and drugs and slavery right in front of you. But she's so sweet looking, isn't she, Tanner? Mm-hmm. Doesn't she look great? You couldn't imagine that she would be a character in a movie. She would be like Dr. Evil, because she's so kind and gentle, and she just seems kind of dotty and like she's not really plugged in. This woman knows exactly what she's doing. When I make the comment, they could be ill-intended or incompetent, the outcome is the same. No, this woman is ill-intended from my street corner. From her street corner, it all makes perfect sense. It all makes perfect sense. We're going to transfer all the money to the wealthiest people while we claim we're for the every man and every woman. And when it's all done, the currency is going to collapse, because she says that the debt level is 109% of GDP, and never in the history of the world has a debt ever been repaid by a sovereign government when the debt level exceeds 100% of GDP. So we're already out there in never before land. And she's saying that the historical interest rate, the interest rates are low, so the debt burden is manageable. Yet she was the chair of the Federal Reserve, so she knew exactly where interest rates were going to go. Let's play Roman numeral number 11.
It takes a while for that to filter into the CPI. And so I have every expectation that the single largest contributor to it, to inflation, is going to be moving down over this year.
And that will bring the rest of it with it. So in 2021, you did say that inflation was transitory. Do you regret saying that now?
I regret saying it was transitory. It has come down, but I think transitory means a few weeks or months to most people.
Thank you for your honesty. That just kind of just flew by. Nobody's going to remember that. What I'm going to remember is Janet Yellen presided over the greatest accumulation of debt in American history when she was the chairman of the Fed and the Secretary of the Treasury. A staggering $15 trillion of debt was accumulated under her watch. And this is where the involvement of Tom Emmer. Tom Emmer, my congressman here from Minnesota, Congressional District 6, who I'm going to invite on the show again for our 200th episode. Please, everybody who knows Tom, please get the word out because I like to hear it from his perspective because I only know it from mine. And my perspective is, Tom, you lied to the American people in the last time the debt ceiling was raised, which allowed the government to suspend the debt ceiling until when? Until right now. Until right now. Janet Yellen's last official act. Tanner, could you put this up, this letter? This is to the Speaker of the House from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. This is how the sausage gets made. Dear Mr. Speaker, I write to keep you appraised of actions the Treasury Department is taking in regards to the debt limit. In my letter of December 27th, I noted that the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, that would be the act that Tom Emmer sold to the American people as the greatest cuts to spending in American history, the Fiscal Responsibility Act. You know, the fiscal responsibility, you can almost take the name of these bills and recognize that if you just flip it around and say it's the Fiscal Irresponsibility Act of 2023, you'd really get the meaning of what was going on. This is Tom Emmer's work with Kevin McCarthy. I noted that the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 suspended the statutory debt limit through January 1, 2025, and established a new limit effective January 2nd, 2025. And I inform you that Treasury expected to reach the new limit between January 14th and 23rd. This letter serves to notify you that the Treasury is going to start taking extraordinary measures on January 21. Hey, we're broke. So now there's going to be another fight over the debt ceiling limit. It's not a fight, it's theater. The debt ceiling's going to go up. You are going to be enslaved. I'm going to be enslaved. Tanner's going to be enslaved. His daughter's going to be enslaved to a crushing debt, which is the product of these people. This is the fruits that they have brought us. This is ridiculous. We accept this because we are slothful. We're lazy, and we don't understand the implications of what this means. Well, unfortunately, I do understand. So I'm going to make it very simple. Come to the Spaces meeting, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central Time, on X, Precinct Strategy, on this coming Friday night and every Friday night thereafter, so that we, the people, can get involved in our local political parties and get rid of these folks. They're going to keep doing it until they're afraid of us. That's just the way it is. They're all wearing MAGA hats now. That's not who they are. That is not who they are. They are members of secret societies, and they think we're stupid. And as long as we act like we're stupid, they will continue to treat us in that fashion. Now we have a new Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent. He is the first openly gay Secretary of the Treasury as we pursue a more perfect union. And he had his confirmation hearings, and we have a new uni-party forming up. It's not going to be the one we had yesterday. It's the new one, because all these people want to keep their jobs in show business. Please play Roman numeral number 12.
About the legislation that was written in this room that was the biggest transformation on clean energy in American history. That is our package that basically said the tax code as it relates to energy is a broken down mess. And we basically said we're going to have a technology neutral system. The more you reduce carbon, the bigger your tax savings. Now there is a big effort in the Trump administration to reverse it. I think that's going to be bad for the economy, but it is going to be damn good for China because we are in an arms race on clean energy with them. Are you going to be on the side of people who want to unravel this?
Senator Wyden, just so we can frame this for everyone in the room, China will build 100 new coal plants this year. There is not a clean energy race. There is an energy race. China will build 10 nuclear plants this year. That is not solar. I am in favor of more nuclear plants. And I would note that the IRA, as scored by the CBO, is wildly out of control in terms of spending on the upside.
Oh, that was a beheading of Senator Wyden. We got a new sheriff in town, Scott Bessent, Yale graduate. He was the president of the secret Wolf's Head Society. There are 3 big secret societies at the Yale University, the most famous of which is Skull and Bones. But there's other ones, the Wolf's Head Society. Of course, we don't know what goes on in a secret society. That's why it's secret. But I'm going to tell you what I think might be going on there. The transmission of the skills related to ritual magic. Look at how this man is my age. Look at how good he looks. This guy's looking good. This guy is polished. He's a billionaire. He got his connections at Yale. He's really highly, highly trained. This is a very spooky dude. He's also a Yale graduate, just like Janet Yellen. I don't know that he is going to be any different, really. We're going to have to see how things turn out with the debt. But what do they do in the Wolf's Head Society? As I said, I don't know for sure. One can presume when I read about the edges of it, and having been in secret societies myself, that there's a transmission of knowledge about how to perform extraordinary skills, how to develop and to perform extraordinary skills. Doesn't have to be magic. I don't know. I'm not there. Well-being, to maintain well-being, is an extraordinary human skill, particularly in these days and times. But the wolf's head symbol, traditionally, is associated with human beings being able to become animals, shapeshifters. Now, that sounds rather fantastic. I get it. But you got to try it before you say it's not possible. And traditionally, in this kind of training, someone will pick out an animal that they want to invest themselves in. They'll study the animal. They'll seek to bring the animal's characteristics into their lives. This is, sophisticated stuff, actually. And it's a secret. So again, I don't know what they do in there. I just know he is, from his energy, quite a trained individual. Let's take a look at another clip of Mr. Bessent on Trump's impending tariff regimes.
I believe these tariffs, you can call it whatever you want in terms of trying to gussy it up. They're going to be paid for by our workers and small businesses. And all through the campaign, we heard they weren't, that foreign countries were going to pay it. I think that's baloney. It's going to be paid for by workers and small businesses. So, your response.
Yes, Senator, I would respectfully disagree. And the history of tariffs and tariff theory, optimal tariff theory, does not support what you're saying. Traditionally, we see that the current, if we were to say use a number that has been thrown around in the press of 10%, then traditionally the currency appreciates by 4%. So the 10% is not passed through. Then we have various elasticities. Consumer preferences may change. And finally, foreign manufacturers, especially China, which is trying to export their way out of their current economic malaise, they will continue cutting prices to maintain market share.
Boy, not a line on his face, got all of his hair. He's 3 years younger than me. He's looking good. Looking good. And he's also giving you the Professor Penn overview of tariffs, which I've been saying for quite a long time. When he says that the U.S. dollar will appreciate, he's saying that other currencies will devalue to offset the impact of the tariffs. Yes, they will. That people can choose to do other things. They can buy other items other than the tariffed items, or not buy anything at all, which makes the inflationary effect zero because there's no economic activity. The fact that you don't have tires on your car, that's another issue. Now, President Trump is serious about changing uh, the international trade architecture. I believe he's serious about it. He has started something called the External Revenue Service as a mirror to the Internal Revenue Service because this revenue collection agency will be aimed at collecting money from the people who profit from the international trade that goes on in our country. President Trump is not aiming at ending trade, he's aiming at taxing the trade. And I can speak about this quite specifically because, as you know, I'm involved in the tire business. And since I'm taking a fly by the tire business, tireget.com, it's everything you need to know about tires. It's right there. I got it all. 11 brands. The price is right. I'll help you with your customer service. We'll put them on right in your backyard. Tireget is the culmination of a career in the tire business that I started in 1979. And when I started, there was no imported tires. 100% of the tires used in this country were made in this country. Well, I've been saying that about 50% of the tires that are used in this country are made here, and I'm incorrect. I did quite a deep dive into it, and it turns out that in terms of the tires that are on your car or your light truck or your SUV, what you're driving around in today, those kind of tires, between 70 and 80% of that kind of tires, we call them consumer tires, between 70 and 80% of those tires are, guess what? They're imported. Yes, they are imported. So President Trump is starting this External Revenue Service because people run away and don't pay their tariff bills and their duty bills. And then they pop up again with a new company down the block and rob us again. And I've been watching this for years. Now, I can't do it. I'm born here. I'm an American citizen. I have my relationships and my reputation here. And I've been paying taxes to the government since I started my first business. And in fact, one could say as a business owner, you're just a tax collector. But people rob. When I say people, lots of people import, get a big tariff bill or duty bill, and then they bankrupt their company and run away and they don't pay it, which, bankruptcy is okay. People fail. But they bankrupt to avoid paying, and then they open up down the block under another name and do it all over again and again and again and again. So President Trump is bringing this to an end. And this makes me happy because, it's like if you're a legal immigrant to the country and you went through the process and then people are pouring across the border because the government's letting them in, or you paid for your student loans like I'm paying for my kids, and it all gets written off except for me because I work, right? And then you got the tariffs and the duties. I pay all the bills, pay all the legal, go through all the sleepless nights, and a guy down the block that I know just BK's his company and opens up with a different name and skips out on the obligation. This kind of stuff could make a person bitter. But I'm not going to get bitter. I'm going to let the process play itself out. And in the tire business, this is a big deal because 80% of the consumer tires are imported. It turns out, which I did not know, that a very large percentage of these tires are coming from Canada and Mexico. I knew there was a lot. I just didn't know it was this much. I thought it was all coming from Chinese companies. No, Canada and Mexico accounted for 18% of the units that are imported and 25% of the imported tires by volume. So this thing is going to have a big impact on the tire business, of which I am paying close attention to. And let me just give you the summary statement. I really don't have a big I really don't have a big I really don't put a lot of stock in what anybody says. I read the Federal Register. I look at what they do. So we're going to see what President Trump's going to do on February 5th. And if you happen to be in the administration, because I know some of you do watch me, which I appreciate, or you're close to the administration, I want to remind you, because there's so much going on, it's easy to miss it. The second year final determination of the tax rate on tires imported into this country from Thailand will be announced on February 5th. That's 65 million tires out of a total that are sold here of about 250 million. So it's about, what is that? 25%, 30% of the tires, the units of tires that are sold in this country are manufactured by 10 companies in Thailand, 8 of which are owned by Chinese firms that migrated from China to Thailand when duties were put on the China production. They just moved it all down to Thailand. I don't buy those tires because my government has placed anti-dumping on them, and that says when there's anti-dumping, it says there's an illegal trade in those tires, and they have anti-dumping duties. I know we're getting a little bit in the weeds with this, but here's the summary statement. President Trump is going to announce a tax rate on those tires February 5th. From that rate, I'm going to learn something, and I'm going to share it with you. There are 3 possible outcomes. It's all hat, no cattle. It's just talking because the tariff rate stays low, and he's just talking. Number 2, he blows the tariff rate out, and he changes the tire industry substantially overnight. Or number 3, he continues it for another year at the same rate to sucker people into a killing zone, which we won't then not know until about this time next year. But we're going to see something, and we're going to know something. We're going to eliminate some possibilities. We're going to get a view. This audience, is going to get a view into President Trump's tariff and duty policies from his first major administrative decision, which will be announced on or about February 5th. It's in 2 weeks. So we'll be watching that closely, and I'll get back to you on it. I was going to go into great depth about Minnesota GOP today. We don't have the time. It deserves more time than short shrift because there's a lot going on here in the Minnesota GOP. But for all of you that are listening to me, we the people are going to know if you're hiding or if you've converted to being pro-American citizen, pro-prosperity and anti-war. We're going to know. You're not going to be able to hide from us. We're going to watch what you do. And from what you do, we will know. But I'm going into it with a great deal of trepidation about who these people are and what they're up to. For example, when Alex Plekish says we're going to develop better candidates. What's a better candidate, Alex? Somebody that supports the war in the Ukraine, which you visited last year? Someone who supports the wars in the Middle East, which you visited last year? Is that your idea of a better candidate? Somebody that's going to support the ongoing forever war? Well, from our personal conversations, unless you come on here and tell me different, which I'm inviting you on, because if you tell me different, all I can do is believe the words that are coming out of your mouth. But right now, what's coming out of your mouth is the same old establishment drivel that's dragged down the Republican Party and stood in the way of the American citizens for the last 20 years. If you want to change, I'm open to it. I would love to work with you. I'm inviting you on. Maybe you and Tom Emmer could come on the same episode. Wouldn't that be epic? And on that note, because time is running out, I want to thank you for joining me. If I'm starting to sound a little angry, it's because I'm scared. I'm not afraid to say I'm scared. There's a lot of change going on. It is scary. And the lying is scary. And the secret societies are scary. And all these conflicting interests are scary because we do have a brief moment in time where it's a jump ball. So please come to the X Spaces on Friday night. I'll remind you again, God willing, on Thursday. And I always like to go out with something that's uplifting. I came across Imelda May, who's an interesting singer. She doesn't have a great following yet, but man, she's got her own thing going on, and I like creativity. So we're going to go out with Johnny's Got a Boom Boom. It's a short piece. I wish you all well. God bless all of us. We're in a brave new world now. Let's make it a world of peace and prosperity together. Thanks very much for joining.
Have a good night, everybody.
With a hook, those big bass notes under my chest, stuck in my throat, pulling me down like a woman on the ground. Rose up from the depths with a deep down sound. Johnny got a boom boom, Johnny got a bam. He got a big body body, long their neck. So it's a woman that he held his grip. Big vibrations, yeah, just one glance. It's gonna blow my mind. It's gonna make me wild, make it wild. Johnny got a boom boom, Johnny got a bam. He got one set man. See what's in his hands. Got no joy. He's a big bad boy. It's gonna freak you out. You're gonna see God. Thank you, good night.